Bring me her lungs and her liver. Let's just start with that. That is a direct quote from the evil queen, and that is where the real story of Snow White actually begins. So, you might want to forget everything you think you know.
And when the huntsman came back, he didn't have Snow White's organs. Of course, he had a boar's, but the queen had no idea. The original story is so specific, it's chilling. It says she salted them and ate them, truly believing she was consuming her own stepdaughter.
All right, let's get into this because the story we all know is frankly a lie. What we're doing here is unpacking the original 1812 version from the Grimm brothers. And trust me, it reads less like a fairy tale and a lot more like a cold case crime file.
And here's the most important part to understand right from the get-go. This entire horrifying story, it didn't start with vanity. It wasn't about who was the fairest of them all. It started with a plan for cannibalism. The queen wanted to eat her.
So, how did she find out the huntsman botched the job? She went to her, let's call it, surveillance tool. The magic mirror wasn't just there for flattery. It was her source of intel. And when it told her Snow White was still alive and well, the rage, the betrayal, that's when she realized, if you want someone murdered right, you gotta do it yourself. Okay, so her proxy failed. Now we get to see the queen's own attempts. And this is where things get really dark, because she takes matters into her own hands, and her methods become way more personal and way more violent. Her first attempt wasn't even poison. It was strangulation. Think about how up close and personal that is. She disguises herself, gets right in there with Snow White, and physically laces a corset so tight that the girl just can't breathe. It's brutal, it's hands-on, and the only reason it didn't work is because the dwarves showed up and literally cut her out of it.
So, attempt number 1 is a bust. The queen has to escalate. Strangulation didn't work, so she moves on to something she thinks is a sure thing: poison. And yeah, this is where that famous apple finally comes into the picture. And her cunning here is just wow. She doesn't come back as the same old woman. Nope. She creates a whole new persona. This time, she's a harmless farmer's wife. You know, someone you would totally trust. Someone you would absolutely take an apple from. The deception was everything. And this time, it works. The poison apple does the trick. Snow White collapses, looking so much like she's dead that the dwarves are just heartbroken. They can't bring themselves to actually bury her. So instead, they build her this glass coffin, putting her body on display. And this is where our prince shows up. But let me be very clear. He is not the hero of this story. In fact, his arrival is where this tale goes from being a horror story to being something just deeply disturbing. He sees this beautiful corpse in a glass box and just becomes obsessed. He begs the dwarves for the coffin. And his reason? He says, "I cannot live without looking at her." Just let that sink in. He's not talking about a person. He's talking about a body, an object to be looked at. Let's not mince words here. The prince did not rescue Snow White. He was a necrophile who bought one thing from the dwarves: a corpse. He paid them so he could take her body home, put it on display, and just stare at it.
So yeah, you can forget everything you've ever heard about true love's kiss. That was a much later invention. The original Grimm reality is so much more random and, frankly, kind of violent. As the prince's servants are carrying this super heavy coffin, one of them gets tired and angry about it, so he just hits the corpse on the back. That jolt is what dislodges the piece of poisoned apple from her throat, and poof, she wakes up. She was revived by an act of workplace rage. So Snow White is alive again. And what's the first thing she and her new corpse-loving fiancé decide to do? Live happily ever after? Nope. They immediately start plotting a truly gruesome revenge. And the trap they set is just brilliant. They use the queen's one fatal flaw, her insane vanity, against her. They announce a huge wedding and send her an invitation. The queen, of course, has to ask her mirror who the fairest is now. And when it says the young queen, she has no idea it's Snow White. She is so consumed by jealousy that she has to go see for herself, and she walks right into the ambush. And what they have waiting for her at this wedding, it's the final and maybe the most horrific scene in this entire story. This isn't justice. This is straight up torture.
The moment she walks into that wedding hall, the trap is sprung. They've had iron shoes sitting in a fire, and they pulled them out with tongs, glowing red fought. They force these burning shoes onto her feet, and then they make her dance. She's forced to dance in agony in front of everyone until she literally drops dead.
And here's the final detail that'll just turn your stomach. Snow White, our hero, the victim, she stood there and watched the whole thing. The innocent girl is gone. In her place is a cold, calculating avenger who just oversaw the public torture and execution of her enemy.
So no, the story of Snow White was never about a damsel in distress waiting for a prince. It was about attempted cannibalism, multiple murder attempts, necrophilia, and a final brutal act of revenge. This wasn't a fairy tale, it was a crime scene.